If one sound defines the spring in Pennsylvania, it's by far the call of the spring peeper. For many people, they are heard far more often than they are seen. Their voices fill wetlands, roadside ditches, flooded forests, ponds, and even the back of the Walmart supercenters where water collects. On warm spring nights, thousands of tiny frogs announce the winter is finally over. Despite being one of the most abundant amphibians in our study site, the spring peeper remains surprisingly difficult to observe. Time and time again during Frog Week 2026, we approached calling choruses only to have them fall silent the moment we arrived. The frogs would vanish into the vegetation, leaving only the memory of the deafening chorus that filled the night moments before. Yet their story is of incredible importance. It's finally time to tell the story of the frog so synonymous with the spring they named it after it for the common name, the spring peeper. My name is Aaron Capoli, and we're going to talk about the spring peeper across central and western Pennsylvania in Frog Week 2026. During road rescue surveys, the calls of the spring peeper often provide our first indication that suitable breeding habitat exists nearby. Whether it's wetlands, flooded woodlands, roadside pools, or temporary ponds that might otherwise go unnoticed, suddenly they come alive with the unmistakable chorus of the spring peeper guiding us directly to the breeding sites. This reminds us that water is present where amphibians could survive and reproduce. For all their abundance, spring peepers are often overlooked. They are not the largest frogs, and they're not the rarest frogs. Quite the contrary. They rarely become the focus of conservation stories, but perhaps that's exactly why their story matters the most, especially in Frog Week 2026. The spring peeper is the soundtrack of the spring in Pennsylvania. Their chorus signals the beginning of another breeding season and serves as a reminder that healthy wetlands still exist across the landscape. Long before most people notice the arrival of the spring, these peepers are already there, hidden among the leaves and branches, telling us that life has returned to the wetlands once again. Sometimes the most important stories are not the rarest. Sometimes they're the ones that we hear every spring and forget to appreciate. I'm out here doing the spotted salamander migration and got a little female spring peeper, I think. Maybe it's a male. I'm setting them off here. He does not like me. I keep bothering him. That works. What I'm holding in my hand is a male spring peeper, and I brought him over here to get some nice pictures. Ever since I brought him over here, he doesn't really trust me, so he's been watching me, but I'm also wearing camo, so I assume he thinks I might be a really good forest or a good tree, which makes a lot of sense. He's not very happy with me that I took him out of where he was calling though. But here's a male spring peeper, guys. Look how small, just balancing off of the tip of my finger. I would never have guessed that a spring peeper would have been so calm. He was wrestling with me and fighting with me just moments ago, and now he's literally just perching right on top of my ring finger. So what a cool little frog. They are one of the loudest voices, and it's been very challenging trying to get them in Frog Week videos because of their size. I actually had to go out and get a specialized lens and a camera to be able to focus on them, and thank goodness technology is catching up because now the phone is also capable of getting these guys in a decent light. But this is just a quick little field extra to show you guys. We got some spring peepers finally. So that's that little peeping noise. That's a spring peeper calling. All those spring peepers are calling, and this is one of them. He's gonna go join his friends here in just a little bit. Just wanted to get this guy because he just happened to appear right in front of me, and what a perfect opportunity, I thought. Hello. He thinks I'm a tree. The northern spring peeper is seldomly seen except during the breeding season, and even though it's perhaps our most abundant tree frog, it's still difficult to find this animal whenever the breeding season ends. Its activity level begins with the wood frogs in the beginning and ends even into the season when the spring peepers are calling alongside the gray tree frogs, fowler's toads, and other late bloomers. This frog has the longest breeding season, but yet is one of the hardest to find. The most recognizable feature identifying the northern spring peeper is the large, dark, irregularly X-shaped mark in the middle of its back. This tiny frog, about the size of your thumbnail, can lay up to as many as 1,000 eggs, and it could take 90 to 100 days for little froglets to climb onto the nearby grass and begin their life as an adult, going from tadpole to tree frog. As I was preparing to talk about the spring peeper for this year's story, I reviewed a lot of the literature written in this state, whether it was from 1999 from Larry Schaefer, The Pennsylvania Amphibians and Reptiles, written by the Fish and Boat Commission, or Amphibians and Reptiles of Pennsylvania and the Northeast from Art Holz, C.J. McCoy, and others. I began to see a common theme. The spring peeper's breeding season typically was around early March. However, we found them in mid to late February. A sign of things changing or coincidence? It's open for interpretation. However, this has been the common theme for Frog Week over the last few years. Even as the snow has finished falling and still lays on the ground, the spring peepers can sometimes still be heard. In this scene, I'm showing the difficulty it took to actually film these little spring peepers. Every time I had the camera pointed at them, they would decide now was not the time to call. For some reason, they would freeze and get camera shy. It took more months to film the spring peeper than it did any other frog, which is very comical because they're the most abundant species, but every time you get close to them, they freeze up and stop calling. It took a long time to finally get these spring peepers calling for you on film. You can hear how hard my macro lens is trying to focus on these little spring peepers. As we're telling the story of the spring peeper, I wanted to make sure that we paid homage to a few of the books that talked about their distribution that inspired me over the years. From C.J. McCoy and Art Holz, their books were some of the most authoritative distribution maps of amphibians across western, central, and all of Pennsylvania. I wanted to make sure that we included that their physical copies of these records were what jump-started all of the digital records that would later precede them. In the maps that these guys have, they were physical documented records of specimens that they had found throughout these counties. That would later change as PARS, the Pennsylvania Amphibian and Reptile Survey, in 2013 would give people the opportunity to upload pictures and audio of these frogs and toads, finally giving the state a true understanding of the distribution, not just from the researchers, but from anybody in the public that wanted to volunteer. This would change the game in understanding the density and also the diversity of frogs and toads across western, central, and all of Pennsylvania. In current day, our organization, PA Woods and Forests, focuses on iNaturalist, which is even more streamlined, allowing anybody who's involved in our project to upload pictures and videos, basically audio, of frogs and toads calling and interacting in the environment. And we've been able to further push the envelope in understanding the distribution of our frogs and toads. It's my understanding the spring peeper is by far the most overlooked and underappreciated frog we have in the entire Frog Week project, but it's also probably overlooked across the entire state. The perception of this frog is they're everywhere, they're always heard, and they're not that interesting, even from some folks who go out looking to document frogs and toads on Pars and iNaturalist. It's common that these sounds get overlooked. This is something that I even had to challenge myself this year, to take more notice, appreciate these frogs even more. And as they challenged me as a videographer, I also wanted to pay homage to them with getting their audio calls on iNaturalist every single time I was out in the field. Because you never know, one year you might hear them calling in abundance and the next they're gone. Even though that sounds as far-fetched as possible with an animal like the Spring Peeper, looking back at all of these records and reviewing the electronic databases, it's very possible that some species are here today and could be gone tomorrow. That's why we keep focus on all of these frogs and toads across our iNaturalist project. And the good thing is we don't have any records that are actual locations. We keep all of it concealed to respect the frogs and toads. And that's what we want to do with this story for Frog Week 2026.
Probably blackberry bush for the most part.
And then look at this little Spring Peeper, a cute little frog. This is who I've been filming, making the peeping sound. He knows that he's been detected, so he's very quiet right now. But look at this little frog. He actually blows in the wind with the leaves. How about that? Beautiful little Spring Peeper. If you enjoyed this episode, consider liking and subscribing for more content. We're going to continue telling the story of all the frogs and toads we encountered across the Frog Week 2026 project this year. And if you wanted to see more about the distribution maps that took place across the state, I have those after our graphic of Frog Week 2026. So I hope that you'll like and subscribe and consider following us on this journey through the Frog Week 2026 project. Enjoy the graphics, you guys. Thanks.
Chase what we desire.